Here's more information that I found on family searches, genealogical references, related to historical societies and pretty much the founding of what we know as America. Um, I'm learning more and more about how to find tribal affiliations through family lineages and basically um, who a person can be just based off their last name, right? And not even so much, human migration, but just, their last name. I see this right here, right? I looked up my last name and I found out there was a county in Georgia, near Damascus. So I have family there, right? And I noticed that, when I was looking at who like the early uh, families who were in this particular area, because there are cities in this county. And I see like there's a Garnett, right? There's a Barry, there's a Bennon, there's a Luke, there's a Lyon, there's a Alexander, there's a Willingham, there's a Eubank. And like the names just roll off my tongue so easily. So like I can tell like it's there is encoded, right? And I see Thomas, I see James, I see Joshua, right? And I have this Foster, right? This is like in my line as well, Foster. I know a bunch of Fosters, and they're also in my line. So I see, you know, I didn't see, the name early. That's what I didn't see. So I need to find out if the people from Early County, Georgia, right, particularly Damascus and the other cities, is there people there with the last name Early? Because again, a county is a district that keeps records of all families, right? It's essentially a tribe. So like if you look at, a place like Chicago, right? The county there is Cook. So all the cities related to Cook, those are all families who are there, right? Who've been there for generations beyond what since the founding of the city. So I go over here. I haven't even went on the other website yet, Ancestry. I'm going to do that after I do the video. And I see here, this is what I see. I see in Savannah, Georgia, right? Which is outside of Atlanta and outside of the county Early. I see a street called Early right here. And I look around, and I see that, the thing that stands out the most to me is, because whatever is commercial next to the street you're named after, right? That means that those families, who come from your particular surname, right? Those were their enterprises. You see what I mean? And this is what I found out right here. I go up, I go up, I go up, and I see this. Because you remember Early, right? That's EL. That means God in Canaan. And I see this right here. I see congregation, Benaiah, Brith Jacob, right? So it's basically an Orthodox synagogue, and, it has its origins in Romantic, right? Romantic theology, right? Romantic theology. So you look at today and you see what the people who have Echo, the last name E, right? The word E. You see people who are in the mediums today who have that last name, and the person that stands out to me the most who is from Atlanta, right? Is Anthony Edwards from St. Paul. And I was just there before he got drafted, right? I was just there, and I think that's kind of interesting, right? I think like you look at these public organizations like these high masonry societies. I think like they try to keep families together as best as they can. Like you'll get the NBA draft that is rigged, right? To that point, to that extent, I think you see things like that happens. I don't think they do things off a whim like that. Even when I looked at the 2008 draft with Derrick Rose, right? I knew it was rigged because the Chicago Bulls had like a 1.9 chance of getting it, right? They were essentially down in the lottery, but they end up getting him, and he end up playing for his hometown. So, but I go down here and I see the street, right? I see this street and I say, what is this connector right here? It says Herbersham. So that tells me right there, Herbersham, that's basically, and again, it leads into a circle, and I don't know too many circle streets. I don't know too many circle roads. I should say. I shouldn't say street. I don't know too many circle roads. I've never been to many. Um, like you see this, right? And you see Herbersham, and the thing that stands out to me about that is the word Habasha, right? Which essentially means Christian or Christ or crisp. That's what Habasha mean, or it can also mean ham. Like ham as in burnt, or bronze. That exactly is what stands out to me as well. And I see Jackson, I see Willer. You see like a lot of place names with the E in it. You know what I mean? Like White, Lee Hardy, Stevenson, right? That stood out to me as well, Stevenson. And then in this place right here, right? I don't know the population of African Americans in this particular town. But I noticed also that, they have suits, like, basically like hotels and stuff like that. So this lets me know that, there's establishments nearby that may be related to capital business, right? Like politics, like it leads into that. So that's what I see. That's what I see, man. And not to go too far down, but you see Eisenhower, all these E words like Eisenhower, Early, Edwards, Ellis, like all these names are related to one another. They come from the military branch, or I should say the military department. They come from the military department Echo. So you look at the original brigades, right? All those people who had the last name with the E, they were in suit, So I think that's interesting, right? I think that's interesting. Um, and again, like when you notice like your family is naming you, like your mother is naming you, your father is naming you, the names that come to mind are just like names that sort of they culminate over what they know and what they hear, or what they're used to, or what they're comfortable with. So you also see that too. Um, and this is another thing I see, right? You see Essen Market, Essen Market, right? Essen Market, that's an Asian grocery store, right? So even they know the history, right? They even know where they're from. You know what I mean? Um, so like you look at this, right? This is an angle, 73rd. This is an angle. So you find 73rd in places like Chicago, right? That could be located on the east side, right? So you look at 73rd. That's closer to a street called Ellis or Langley. You know what I mean? So again, that's that angle, 73rd. So the 73rd families, right? They meet on this road. All the families, who are like from 73rd, and they may be near 74th. These families meet at this angle. You know what I mean? So that's another thing that I see. Um, that's another thing that I see, right? So like automatically what I'm seeing is that these families right here, right? You know, these families they meet in Chicago. This is why Atlanta and Chicago is so close. These families meet in Chicago. So you got Chicago, Cleveland, um, and Atlanta. Chicago, Cleveland, and Atlanta. These families meet like very close to one another. Cause you can go to these places, right? And you can be looking around and you meet the people and you'll be like, you know, like who like what people are you all closely assimilated to? And some people will be like, some people will be walking around and like they'll have on like a Cleveland's Indian hat or like a Atlanta Braves hat or something like that, or an Atlanta's Brave jersey. And you'll see people in Cleveland who may do the same thing, right? But you wouldn't know what that actually meant unless you knew what they were thinking, right? Or what it meant to them. Like you see how people in Chicago, they may wear apart from like, the other things, right? You may like what is like something that Chicagoans love to wear that don't necessarily symbolize a Chicago. Um, I want to think like maybe like a New York's cap, a New Era cap, a New York cap. People will wear something like that, right? It'll either be like New York, Atlanta, not even Atlanta, because like people in Chicago, I don't see them wearing Atlanta gear like that. They may wear like LA gear or New York gear. It'll be those two, right? The two major hubs. They'll do something like that. But again, this small area right here. This small area right here. Like you just follow the roads. And I'm glad I found this information. Just thinking about it, right? Um, Kensington, right? That leads into Philadelphia. You see what I mean? So America is like this big pot of gumbo. It's like this big pot of gumbo, like where every angle of the earth meets, right? Especially on this side of the world. You know? So you see LaSalle, that's the west side of Chicago. Like we know it's on the west side of Chicago. It's Van Buren. Um, there's another street. I can't think of it right now. Not Canal. It's another street. Um, can't think of it. You know. So you see this. This is my grandmother's nickname, Sweet Bay. So and this is a lane. So I think that's interesting. Um, I see Meridian, right? That's Mississippi. I see Jackson. That's Mississippi. Cornell. That's Chicago. You know. So you see a people like who with the name early, right? It leads them to a place like this where like the roads kind of end and like you see like this is a reserve pretty and the street like it leads into it. This is a reserve and it's open to the public. It's not some feudal operation, right? Where it's just like it's private, right? It's only for Native Americans and Indians, right? No, this is a public reserve. Like you can go in here and it leads you into a parkway, right? Truman, Harry S. Truman. So I need to find out more about Harry S. Truman, and that's what I'm going to do. I need to find out more about him, and I'm gonna do that after this video. So because if he's close to the street early, right, that means that he one of his executive orders may have done something for Jewish people. That's what I'm trying to figure out. So I need to figure that out. You see? So you got a baseball park here and you got an area that's full of green. You know what I mean? Like just green trees, you know. Like literally this area right here looks like parts of Detroit and Livonia. If you've ever been to Detroit, you know about the area called Livonia. This looks like this area right here. And I noticed that a lot of people with that last name, they live close to that area called Brightmoor, which is kind of like an area like this as well, you know? So the constructors, or I should say the infravaluators, right? The infravaluators, the engineers like who designed the layouts and plots of this particular landmass, they had some things in mind when they were seeing these names. And like we don't really know the alchemy of words. Like we don't really know what this stuff really means. Cause like you look at it on surface, but you don't really think like, okay, what could this really, really, really mean? You know what I mean? Like what this could really mean. Like we don't know how close the word Hampton is with Mosby, right? Unless we were there when these places were developed, right? You know, because again, like this is next to a baseball field, so you know, like most of these people have to be Negroes. You see what I mean? So, you know, I only know people who are like ancient Ethiopians to like be in places like Georgia and Mississippi. I don't even want to say Mississippi, right? I want to say Georgia um and like there's a large hub of Ethiopians in Minnesota. So I'm thinking like Minnesota and Georgia, and I know the Mississippi River runs up to St. Paul, Minnesota. I know that because I've rode over it before. Like I've thrown injera bread into the riverway where the geese and birds are. So you know, I've been over the Mississippi River a bunch of times as a child and as an adult. So um, yeah, this is interesting. This is interesting. So this is again, this is just another way you can do genealogy, right? You know, this is another way you can find people who are related to you. This is another way you can find who people are just by knowing their name and looking at their face. Like it may be a public post on social media, right? Where they're engaging in community work. Like you can look at a person's last name and tell, like, okay, I have semblance to this person. You know, like I'm already knowing, right? Like you see this name right here. Like if I see someone who's from like my earlier childhood class memories and they have this name right here, like I know this is where we're related, you know, through this part and this part right here. I know that we were on a creek, you know, like we're original, like before colonization, right? Before colonization, right? You see someone with this last name in these areas, right? Any of these names, and you see them, right? The thing that stands out is that before schools were built, right, you had creeks that were designed. You needed creeks to be designed. So if you have a creek somewhere and you're near it and there's schools, those were the people who were part of your tribes. And we all know Atlanta for being the place of the Braves, for being the place of the creeks. You know, like every state has a designation for it being special for something, right? For something. But it's just Georgia, right? It's these creeks that stand out that everybody likes to be a part of. It's these creeks and these lakes. And you know Michigan and Illinois for the Great Lakes. You know, Mississippi for the Stretch River. You know what I mean? You know Florida for being an island. You know New York for the castles. Like all these other places, like these were just places where we just met at, right? The places I just named, you know, like Georgia, Florida, these were places in like Michigan and Illinois. These were places where like high level sciences really took place and like high level ceremony. A place like, you know, Virginia, a place like Tennessee, you know, these are just places where families ultimately gather at, right? And to continue building what they had already saw. You know, like if you saw a creek or something like that, like, and you can put a person's name right there and a person's name right there, you're going to go deep in that genealogy and you're going to see you have a common ancestor with that person before like any other interest arises, right? Like you see someone with a last name and it's next to your street in a particular area in the South and it's next to a landmark, that's where you know you really knew those people at. And like again, this word right here, Hambersham, it reminds me of Gresham. It's like there's a YMCA right here, right? So it reminds me of Gresham, Hambersham, Gresham, and Gresham is a district in Chicago. So again, that reminds me of that. And like you got a Chuck E. Cheese right there, a YMCA. So this is like another Chicago. This is like Savannah. It's like another place where like it's probably the Chicago of the South, to be honest with you. But again, people don't like to say Savannah, Georgia a lot. They like to say Atlanta, but this looks like it has way more activities than Atlanta. It really does. It really does. You know, it's kind of like how people don't say, um, let me see, like people don't say, yeah, like people don't say Livonia, they say Detroit, but you know, Livonia is where everything happens. You know what I mean? Like they don't want you to know that Savannah exists. They don't want you to know that Livonia exists because you're gonna think, well, Atlanta and Detroit is just like they're hoods, right? They're just places you go and just kind of vent. You know, it's not that exactly, but you know, um, like look at all this green though. Look at all this green, man. This is a bike path. So you see Lightning, and again, Haney's Creek, Tubb Street. You got a police station, a military base. All right. So they go that E word again. And then you got Wilson. That's my grandfather named Wilson. Um, so I'm thinking like my people on my father's side, they came from the Florida area into Georgia if they weren't already in Georgia, right? Um, I just got to find that last name and where it's at in other places like in Florida, you know. But clearly, clearly you can see, you know, they came southeastern towards the west coast, like towards Mexico, right? They came through that direction. On one side of the family, my grandmother's side, you know, through my father's side, she probably came up through Mexico or from the west coast, either or. I can't really say. Um, I haven't really looked at her line as much. I just took the fact that I have a surname and, you know, but I know everybody's surnames. I just haven't looked into some of those areas. But, you know, they're probably closely related in that sense. Cause like if you marry someone near you, you likely are, you know, you likely are doing the ancestry, you know, like as opposed to ancestry. You're likely doing the ancestry. Um, cause like if you get with a woman who's like, you know, or, you know, a childhood sweetheart that's like, you know, she lives a couple blocks from you or you went to the same school, somewhere down the line, you all were related through a grandmother or a grandfather somewhere. Um, it's like families, they don't go far. And when they do, they end up meeting back up if you have the same nationality. Like African Americans have the same nationality. So they have the same primordial existence. And this is kind of interesting, right? I didn't know Savannah had a 55th Street, right? So this is the street I was born on in Chicago. This is the street I was born on in Chicago, and this is the east side, right? So again, there's that 55th angle. And what I can see from here is um I see Paulson, which would be like Paulina. Paulson and Paulina, that would be Chicago. I don't know what Waters would be. Maybe Washington or um, Washington or like literally it probably means wash off. You know, so that's kind of like a French word, kind of, or Spanish word. So like Spanish and French is kind of closely related, more so than probably English is. Um, because you know, like French and Spanish, they band together. Because again, they go Alamo, they go Medellin. So Montgomery would be like, yeah, Montgomery would be like Alabama. Madison would be again like the west side of Chicago. Um, Crane, that's the west side of Chicago. And like my Collins side, right? It comes from the west side of Chicago near the Crane district. And again, that's the 55th Street. That's the 55th angle. So all these families are related. All these families are related. You know, so if you meet up in one city and you knew your family knew each other in the South, and you all didn't know you all were in that same city together, this speaks to human migration and patterns. This speaks to it. This definitely speaks to it. Because I wasn't expecting to see Crane. Um, Alamo, that's Texas, right? So, this lets me know that for African Americans, right, this is probably where like the more modern history of like 5,000 years ago, where like you know Asian families and Spanish families met, and they were like originally uh Mazecos, what you would call not even mestizos, but Mazecos, what would be like Maroons, right? Mazecos would be like Spanish Maroons. This is probably where they met in these areas right here. Because what does Pepsi mean? Does that mean Spanish? Like, is that a Spanish word, Pepsi? Like it has to be, right? I see SI, so and I see Pep. Like if you see Pep and SI conjoined, that's probably Spanish. And then Pepsi, right? The way it looks is blue and red, which lets me know it has a Haitian origin. And this the liquid in the pop, right? It's very black. You know what I mean? And it's not necessarily good for you. So I got to look into the science of that. Pizza and wings, cool vibes. So if I see pizza and wings, that means pizza and wings, right? This must mean that this area was Spanish, because like pizza is Italian, um, and wings, right? That would mean that there was like hunter gatherers in the area, because like you don't get chicken unless you're a farmer. And I see Kimball, so that's close. That's Chicago, Kimball. Um, Belt, that's probably a district in Chicago that deals with industry. Um, yeah, Monterey, that's Spanish. Oakview, don't know about that. Hardy, don't know about that. Cumberland, don't know about that. Um, and like the only thing I hate about having, aborigincy, right? The only thing I hate about having aborigincy is that you can't go back to some of these places. Like you can't, like if you're from Chicago and you leave Chicago as an adult, you can't go back because of the political scene. It's violence there. And I know it's the same thing for Savannah, right? It's violence in Savannah. You know what I mean? And like Chicagoans and Savannahans, they're the same people. So um you can't go to these places. So it's like you're sort of an outcast. You're sort of an outcast wherever you go after that. Like you see how Chicagoans they end up in Arizona. Like you have to feel like an outcast once you go there, right? And like I only understand it in that sense. I only understand it. Um, like Buckingham, right? Like imagine like you have to leave a farm and go to Buckingham, England. You know what I mean? Like you got to dress entirely different. You got to act entirely different. It's complete difference. It's a 360. It's a 360. So this lets me know that Buckingham, like okay, Buckingham. And then I see Camelot, which is basically Calumet. So that's Chicago. Camelot, you know what I mean? So it's like a person who has a Calumet sitting on a camel that's smoking. So that lets me know there's a touch of uh Arabianness. You know what I mean? There's a touch of Arabianness. In Johnston, Johnston Murphy. That's a popular shoe in Spain. Um, yeah, I love Johnston Murphys. I own a pair. This right here, Buckingham. Buckingham. So this probably means the people, their main dish or cuisine is pig slaughter, Buckingham. You know what I mean? So this is probably, where Meek Mill's people is from. Kenny Althea in Kensington. He probably has someone in his family named Althea. I wouldn't be surprised. Um, yeah. Like look at all that green though. You know what I mean? Like the houses they're around all green. Like I gotta check out Savannah. I gotta check it out, man. Cause I know, like, if I have a family one day, I know, like, for a fact, like, I'm I'm thinking about going to a place like Georgia, really, and that's what my mind was set on already. You know what I mean? That's what my mind was set on already. Um, like, it would probably be like Georgia or one of these counties, cause like I think that's kind of cool. Like, if you can move back to a county that has your last name and you can kind of see the people who your great 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 grandparents left behind. You know what I mean? Like you're almost generations into that bloodline, even though you left. You know, you may even get a town commemorative just for coming back. You know what I mean? Like just for coming back, you may get a town commemorative. So I'll go ahead and close out. I don't want to overstay this video and it doesn't save. So great peace, Yakoki.